listening to the Soundcast, the official podcast of Tracksounds.com. I am Christopher Coleman, your host, and on this edition, I speak with composer Ryan Amon. Ryan Amon is a composer on the recently released film Elysium, which stars Matt Damon and Jodie Foster, and is directed and co-produced by Neil Blomkamp, who directed District 9. I talk with Ryan Amon and go a little bit deeper into his incredible story of how he came to work on Elysium. We also talk about his experience in writing production music for trailers in comparison to writing an original score for this feature film, and also the unique creative process employed by himself and director Neil Blomkamp in coming up with a score for Elysium. It's pretty well documented now how you've come on to score this film for Neil Blomkamp, Elysium, and so I won't ask you to recount that story yet again, but we know the highlights of it. Basically, he contacted you via email after hearing one of your tracks on a YouTube video, I think it was, that someone had used your music.
Right.
And that's a very unusual story, and I can see why people would want to highlight that. But now, since that's history now, you've gone through the process, you've scored the film releases today, or actually released, I guess it was a midnight release. How has your life changed since that email was sent to you X amount of months ago?
Yeah, it was really quiet for a while. Since I got that email, it was lots of different emotions, from extreme joy to humility to, checking my confidence levels. Can I do this? Am I up for this? And now being here and actually, doing the interviews and walking down the red carpet with the actors, it's been completely surreal now. But it's something that I always wanted to do and really wasn't sure if I get a shot to. And now that I've been able to have a shot doing it, I'm completely addicted, and I really hope I'll get to do more films in the future because it was a blast.
Awesome. Now, how long ago was that actually? Did you receive that first email and begin to talk with Neil Blomkamp?
Oh, that was I would say about 2.5 years ago now.
Oh, wow. Okay. It's quite some time.
Yeah, it was a long, long process. It's been about 2 years since I started writing music, so that first initial email, before we even began working on it, was close to 2.5 years ago.
Wow. And so how long before, well, let me ask you this. Were there other composers in the running? Did he say, hey, I want to use your stuff, but I'm looking at some other guys or girls' stuff too? Or was it just like, hey, you're the man, let's talk, and went from there?
Yeah, it's funny because I never asked him. I think I was too nervous to ask him. But as far as I know, I don't know of anyone else that had been asked to do it before me. And it might, if I asked him in the future and he said, oh yeah, I was thinking of this person or this person, I don't know how I came to get the position that I did. But I was nervous, along the lines of composing. I also thought, well, maybe when the studio kind of steps in and wants to hear things, or some of the producers get involved, maybe the politics of Hollywood will kind of, I wasn't sure how long I'd be able to continue the process if they were going to replace me because of my inexperience or whatnot. But Neil's, that first email from Neil was like, he knew that I hadn't done a film before, and he was completely cool with it. And yeah, I'm forever grateful for him to take a risk on me like that.
Sure, and it's awesome that he did, and I'm sure that fact has given hope to many composers who are working hard to break into the business, as you have been. How long was it from the time you got that email and you had that first conversation before you actually met with the director in person?
Oh boy, I'd have to go way back. I didn't meet with Neil until they flew me up to Vancouver, where the post-production facility was. where his offices were. And that wasn't until, I want to say, October of last year. So I'm not sure how to do the math, but yeah, I came on very late and met him in person very late in the process.
Okay. Wow. But the email was like a couple years ago, you said. So there's
Yeah,
quite
exactly. So
some
it was definitely over a year and a half, over a year and a half before I actually met him in person.
amazing. And so technology, you just communicated over the internet, Skype, or however between time.
Yep, it was just mostly phone calls. A lot of emails too, very short, very concise about, hey, what do you have? Any new ideas for me to listen to? Or I love this track you sent. Can we do another one that's a little bit faster pacing and things like that? But I think we probably only spoke on the phone about 4 or 5 times before I came up to Vancouver to work with him.
Okay. Now, one of the other points that's been brought up in several of your other interviews has been that he didn't want you to see any footage. He wanted you to have somewhat of a clean slate. It sounds like. But did you have anything to work with? Concept art, anything visual at all? What was your starting point?
Yeah, the first thing he sent me, and I can't remember, it was definitely after I started writing, but within a month or two, it wasn't too long after I started writing ideas out, that he sent some photos of a scouting location shoot that they were doing outside of Mexico City, in that big garbage dump area kind of region that's in the film. And he sent me a couple of those photos, so I had an idea of the grittiness and that feel of dirt and earth and everything that kind of went along with it. And then I also got a sketch. I got some early artwork of the Hulk suit that Matt Damon wears, that Max's character has, drilled into his nervous system. So I had a visual of what Matt Damon's character would look like. But those are the only images I had right away to start working.
Okay, so when you started writing the first notes, you just had the description from Neil Baumkamp, or in the basic story, or anything.
Yeah, it was the basic plot that I think they were releasing when on the IMDb page right away. It was, there's the space station up, hovering above the Earth, and he kind of explained the differences of who was living there and then who was left out on Earth, and there wasn't any subplot that I had been privy to. So we started out with ideas of, okay, well, let's do music that sounds like light, and then let's go opposite extreme and let's do music that sounds like darkness. And he wanted me to polarize those two musically and just go from there and experiment with whatever sounds and instruments I thought might convey those two ideas.
Okay. So what was it like looking at the score take shape? Was it did it come together as fast as you expected, or was it herky jerky? Was it smooth? What was the arc of the development of the score?
Well, it definitely took a lot longer than I expected, and I wrote a lot more music than I thought I would be writing, because he's just insatiable for new music, and so when we started getting into the heat of writing, and he wanted to hear some new material every other day sometimes, and so I'd be down there coming up with new ideas and just completely different ideas too. One track would be orchestral in nature, and then the next day I'd try something completely electronic with no orchestral instruments at all, and send that, just trying to get a feel of what sounds he gravitated towards. And so until we kind of got that sonic palette of he likes these sounds and we want these orchestral instruments brought in to mix together, then I had my palette of paint, so to speak, where I could then start throwing stuff up on the canvas. But yeah, it was awesome working with Neil too, because he would never be negative about something I would send over, like, oh, that's way off. He would say something like, okay, well, let's try this instead. Right? He would always turn it in a positive light, which really helped as a composer, to keep moving forward with confidence.
So did that open canvas, at least to start, I guess that kind of mirrored your career to some degree in terms of the production music and trailer music you had been writing prior to. Was that a nice transition? Did that help?
Yeah, it was. I was a little bit, I have to say it was a little bit strange that we didn't have the spotting session as usual, film directors will do. But because he approached it so unique and wanted to try something new and different, which I really applaud. I also felt very comfortable in that world of writing music without seeing, what the imagery was. So my background in production music and trailer music definitely helped in that aspect.
Okay. Um, Now let's back up a little bit and talk about your career in writing production music. And I'm just curious, as a composer, at least for you, was getting your music, quote unquote, discovered, at least a secondary motive for wanting to write that kind of music? Or is it like, no, I just want to have the freedom to write the kind of music, the style of music that I want, and not have the restrictions that would come with, writing for a movie or a television show or a video game? Was that a part of your motivation at all, or not?
Well, when I first started out realizing that, I wanted to do music as a career, and it wasn't until I was, early 20s that I kind of stumbled upon it, like, this is really what I want to do, and I went for it. I'd always wanted to do film music. There was something, I loved movies. I watched a ton of movies all the time, and I wanted to be part of that storytelling process. And so my first foot in the door just happened to be when I came out to LA. I got an assistant job writing or ghostwriting rather for reality TV. And so at that point, I wanted to do something a little bit more epic as well, and I was always looking for an opportunity to do something more orchestral, something more epic in nature. And so trailer music just felt like the right fit at that point, like the next step that I was going to take. And so I just started doing that out of a home studio and working on, working with samples and working on the craft of getting the samples to sound as real as possible to a live orchestra, because, there's limitations when you don't have the budget to go record musicians. And so I worked on that. I worked on that a lot. And there was also a time after doing a couple years of trailer music for these libraries that I wanted to kind of try to get back, into the film side of things, because trailer music is amazing and it's great and it's a lot of fun to write, but it's also very structured. And some of the things I wanted to do and experiment with different sounds and maybe more ethnic instruments, it was a little bit outside of that realm, where if I had sent those tracks over to be, considered for trailer music, they often were rejected because of the strange sounds that I might be incorporating. So I decided to do, my own project, which I called City of the Fallen. And it was more of a personal project I did just for myself in my home studio, and it ended up being something that, okay, well, let me, do a second album and do a third album. And I think there's 5 of them now. And it's just, that was kind of my own, I wanted to go off and kind of do my own voice and try to discover what that was. And it ended up being kind of, in a strange way, closer to film music than probably production music.
Okay. In what way?
Yeah, I'd always wanted. Well, I think because especially one of the albums is called Revelations that I did. Believe it's the third album I'd done for City of the Fallen, and it was just more pastoral. It was more meant for drama films, and a lot of there is a need for that music for trailers for sure. But a lot of the stuff I was being asked to write at the time was mostly action. They wanted the big action stuff with the big, blockbusters coming out and the big back ends and the choir that comes in at the end as well. So it was just something that I like to deviate from a bit and try something a little bit more subtle and a little bit more spiritual, if I could use that word.
Yeah, yeah. So that's surprising to me then to hear you say that there are limitations in writing production music. The production houses want certain things and maybe isn't as much latitude for experimentation as one might think.
Yeah, and maybe that was just my experience. Maybe other composers have had different experiences with the trailer libraries, but yeah, my personal experience was they wanted the action, because I think that's what most of the trailer houses were asking them for. So they were, and I think they were asking for fantasy as well. They wanted some, fantasy music in the vein of maybe Harry Potter or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's a revelation to me. I really, from outside looking in, really thought that you composers would have more freedom writing for production houses, especially. Well, I guess it does make sense what you say, because so much of the music used in trailers sounds very, very similar, and you would think though that they would want their trailer to stand out a little bit more and to have something in there, some sort of instrumentation or something that's like, oh, well, that's different. Just to make it stand out a little bit more would be something they might want to try to do. So that's a very interesting occurrence to me.
Yeah, and I hope they do that more in the future too. I hope they kind of try to branch out a bit and look for more artistic ways to present trailer music in general. Because I think audiences might be getting tired of the same thing over and over again as well.
Yeah, they might be, or they're like, oh, that's they're experiencing the feeling that it's giving them, which is similar to the feeling they had when they watched movie X and Y, and so maybe that's why they do it. Well, let's go back to Elysium. What was your biggest challenge? And you've already expressed a couple of them, as just in the unique way that this whole thing came together for you. And actually writing the music, what was the biggest challenge that you faced for Elysium?
I think the hardest thing for me was trying to find the balance of this mix of instruments to really define these two worlds of Elysium and Earth. And having a blank canvas that big and that broad at the very beginning was a bit terrifying, because I could have approached it from so many different directions. I wasn't sure which one was right. And I can be such a perfectionist at times that I'm constantly going back and listening to what I did and thinking, well, okay, maybe I liked that last week, but I don't like it anymore. And I kept second guessing myself. And I'm probably my own worst enemy when it comes to that stuff, because I need to just trust my instincts and move forward. And I think that's what I learned from this project too, is to trust my instincts.
Okay. What about going to London and recording at Abbey Road, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, that was amazing. that was a conversation that we had up in Vancouver of, where are we going to record, and I had spoken with my mixing engineer and my recording engineer, John Rod, and everyone was telling me we need a big room. This needs to sound huge and epic because of the way the orchestral music had been brought into it. And so we were very lucky to be able to find a slot that was open at Abbey Road Studios in their main room, where they recorded some of the Star Wars films and Lord of the Rings and stuff. Just this massive room with a beautiful sound to it. And just going over to London and walking into that room and it smells like Earth. It was just amazing. I kept pinching myself, thinking, man, I almost feel like I don't deserve to be here. And think of all the great musicians that have been in that room and the great scores that have been recorded there. It was completely surreal.
How long did it take you to kind of get accustomed to the environment you're in and be able to do the work that needed to be done?
Yeah, I made sure I went in really early every morning, as early as they allowed us to go in, and just kind of walk around and feel my way around the studio and sit in the control room and take deep breaths. And then by the time the musicians started coming in to sit down, I felt pretty confident. And then we, started recording, and then it was off to the races. And I fell into a pretty comfortable rhythm after that.
Yeah. Okay. And so how many days did you record there?
We recorded for 3 days at Abbey Road, and it was freezing because it was the middle of January or early January, and trudged through the snow to the studio. And the musicians, I felt bad for them because they had to, lugging the cello cases and the bass cases. But the London Philharmonia was the group that recorded, and they sounded just absolutely amazing. I felt very, very lucky to have them recording for us.
Oh, I can imagine. So in your mind, as you're writing that music and you're doing your mock-ups and so forth, and then you hear it performed live there at Abbey Roads, describe that feeling. Was it like, yeah, that's just how I heard it in my head, or it's beyond what what I could have ever imagined? What was that like?
Well, the best part, I think, was the string recording. We had split them into two groups, and we did brass separately from the strings, so we had more control in the mixing stage. but getting to hear the string sit down and play some of the more pastoral music that's heard in Elysium, because there is a little bit in there, and that was beautiful to me. I, there's nothing more in my mind. There's nothing more moving than a string section playing that kind of music, and it's something that, as good as we can get with sample libraries, and we're getting really, really good. I mean, these companies coming out with these new libraries are just incredible. But nothing can capture that human emotion. That's when they all, when real live players get together and just kind of, it's a very organic thing. And that to me was beautiful. I was almost like in tears on one of those tracks. And not the fact that I had worked on it. It could have been anyone that had written that, but just hearing those musicians get to play something in that style was just beautiful.
Is it going to be difficult? Not that you'll never get to do that again, but does it kind of spoil you a little bit?
Yeah, I'm definitely way, way too spoiled now. I mean, to get first of all, a film like this the first time was, amazing. And then to get to go to Abbey Road to actually do the orchestra there was, I mean, how do you go any higher than that? So I'm way too spoiled. I don't know what it'll be next, but I'll have to change my expectations in the future a bit.
As we're kind of finishing up, I did notice, I went back and I was listening to Clinton Shorter's District 9 score. I haven't listened to that in ages. I haven't rewatched the film in ages. And I was curious if you had seen the film, and were you, had you listened to Clinton Shorter's score for that film for Neil Blomkamp?
Yeah, I did. I watched District 9 in the cinema while I was living down in Bolivia. And I watched it with my wife, and we both came out like really enjoying the film. And I remember the music stuck with me too, especially that opening with the African vocalist. And I mean, I love Clinton's score. And one of the other reasons that I was watching the film, and I watched it again a couple times on DVD before I started working on Elysium, because I wanted to revisit Neil's style with the cinematography that Trent Opolak does, and with the editing that Julian Clark does, and just because I wasn't sure exactly how to approach it, as not having any visuals to go off of. So I used visuals from District 9 and the pacing of that film to kind of also help give me some direction at the beginning.
Oh, smart. Very smart. Well, what I noticed in re-listening, that there's some commonalities, not that the scores sound the same, but there's some characteristics they both have kind of a little darker edge to them. There's that electronic acoustic hybrid. There's kind of that wordless vocal element that weaves its way through both. So I found that those parallels interesting, although yours is much weightier and a lot more energetic and has a stronger edge to it. And so I thought finding those commonalities between the two were very interesting and pleasing to kind of see, because it feels like those worlds are almost connected. Although I forget the time frame of what District 9 was set in. I don't know what years those took place. But I found those connections interesting because the worlds do feel like they could be connected. Was that anything that you and Neil Blomkamp had talked about?
Well, we never really discussed District 9 much, but I could tell after watching it and then seeing when I started seeing footage of Elysium and stuff, that he definitely gravitates as a director towards that darker sound. He likes that darker sound. He likes the lower register frequency, and he also likes to bring in those vocals. It's really something that he feels is powerful, and he wanted to bring it into Elysium as well, and so we did it. And yeah, I hopefully in his films in the future we'll see the same kind of thing come about, because I really like the style musically that he gravitates towards too. So our collaboration together couldn't have been better, because I like the same kind of music he does, and that's the best place to be in as a composer when you're working with a director.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, last question. The unique way that this has all come about for you, I can imagine there are contemporaries of yours, friends of yours, people that you work with who are like, what the heck, man? Why this guy? I've been laboring just as hard. Why couldn't someone use my track in a YouTube video? And at the same time, others just like, man, that's just awesome. It gives me hope. I'm just going to keep on cranking. I'm sure you've probably gotten both kinds of responses to some degree. But what would you tell composers who are in the position that you have been in. You're doing well. You're writing music. Music's being used in TV or production music, but you haven't crossed into that your goal. You haven't hit your goal yet. What would you tell them to do right now, and especially in terms of getting their music out there, whether it's for free, or communicating with people over social media or email? What would you say to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I often think about that. It's, because this whole thing fell into my lap, I did struggle with a little bit of guilt at first, but also because of my faith and being a Christian, like I started to just kind of settle down and say, okay, well, I believe things happen for a reason, and so I got this project because I was supposed to, and I'll just do the best I can with it. But for future composers, people wanting to get into it and trying to kind of break that circle and get in that circle, I would just say, like, if you're really passionate about something and you've got a real big heart to do it, and it's just something that you can't think of doing anything else, then just keep pushing away, because I think it's the people that kind of get frustrated and they kind of give up too early that maybe miss out on some of those opportunities. And also, I would recommend to composers, and I'm so young myself and so new at this that I don't know what kind of advice I can really give, but I always try to look at myself and try to find my own voice if I can. I'm always looking to really dig deep inside of myself and say, well, I know this composer sounds like this, or this composer has this sound that's identifiable. Like, if I can find my voice, because each of us has a different and unique one, try to really focus on that, because that's what makes you marketable, I think.
You've been listening to a Soundcast interview with composer Ryan Amon. I'm your host, Christopher Coleman. I want to thank you for listening. Elysium is in theaters right now in both IMAX and regular format theaters. The soundtrack has been released by Varese Sarabande and is also available now on iTunes and Amazon.com. You can help support the Soundcast and Tracksounds.com by going to Amazon or through iTunes through the links provided in our show notes or anywhere on the Tracksounds site. I want to thank composer Ryan Amon for taking time, and also for Albert Tello of Costa Communications for helping to put this interview together. So that's going to do it for this edition. Please let us know what you thought of this interview and the score Elysium by Ryan Amon. You can do so by emailing us at soundcast@tracksounds.com, hitting us up on Twitter, twitter.com/tracksounds, or on Facebook. We're all over the place. Google+. We'd love to hear from you. So until next time, we want to say, may the notes be with you.